Hello everyone, I'm Aminata Kanbalde, your host for this edition, and I hope that we are all keeping safe and taking the precautionary measures that will protect us and our communities against the COVID-19 pandemic. Dear audience, I'm super excited to welcome you to this edition of the Ignition Hour, where we bring to you great entrepreneurs in an effort of helping you be ignited by their journeys and experiences. Whether you are young entrepreneurs or contemplating embarking on that path. This game changer that is the Ignition Hour is brought to you by Craving for Development, an organization that commits at equipping young entrepreneurs with the requisite skills of being independent and impact-oriented. Ladies and gentlemen, let's project ourselves and imagine an Africa where curiosity, engagement, and grit are the driving forces of our youth. At the Ignition Hour, we are on a mission to make that happen, and we are just getting started. Because our countries need more innovators and stronger entrepreneurs who are ready to do what it takes to challenge the status quo. Another projection that we need to make is one where our pride for our native creations, culture and traditions are revived and celebrated, and where every bit of it is utilized to tell our amazing stories. The topic of this edition is Salone Creative Arts, Thriving or Striving. The increased interest in African history, culture, and realities over the last few years have led to many on the continent and in the African diaspora to re-engage and relearn their culture. And that includes our indigenous and contemporary arts. Traditional African art comprises numerous art forms such as carving, masks, metalwork, textiles, and much more. Many countries and regions within Africa are associated with particular art forms. For instance, Mali and Ivory Coast are renowned for their traditional masks and headdresses. In Nigeria, the bronze sculptures of the Benin people and the terracotta pottery of the Nok culture, dating from around 2500 AD and 900 AD, respectively, are world famous. These artifacts belong to the period before colonialism arrived on the continent. African art had a significant influence on Picasso, one of the most renowned artists of the 20th century and founder of the Cubist art movement. Despite the influence of African art on the international scene, traditional art in Africa was not created for purely aesthetic reasons. Art was meant to be functional. The majority of these artifacts were regarded as sacred, to be used as rituals, worship, and for connecting with the spiritual world. Rapping, DJing, breakdancing, and graffiti art now join an ever-growing and diversifying range of artistic, cultural, intellectual, political, and social practices, products, and performances. The artistic achievements of hip-hop represent a remarkable contribution to world culture. However, the hip-hop nation has created not just art and entertainment, but art with the vision and message of changing the world, locally, nationally, and globally. To discuss all that and much more, we have today in our midst great entrepreneurs and role models, namely Madam Hawa Jane Bangura, who is the co-founder of the Barracks, please let's have a round of applause to welcome her on stage. And Joel Cabo, who's an Afro rap artist and who's gonna join us very soon. Another round of applause, please, for Madam Hawa. Thank you, Hawa, for joining us. Thank you so much. Yeah, Hawa's work explores the concept of identity, how we as African women depict ourselves and our culture through art, and how we tell our stories. It also challenges the way African women are traditionally depicted in art in general. Interestingly, she is a lawyer who has successfully built a great career in law and was practicing as a lawyer at the New York State Bar, and more recently in the corporate sector in Sierra Leone. But she traded all that to embrace her true love, art. So thank you so much once again, and welcome on the platform. Just wanted to know why the shift, what brought you to art, and from being a lawyer, knowing that, you know, majority of people would just encourage people to be lawyers or doctors, more like traditional ways of thinking careers. So what brought you to art?
Well, actually art was my first choice, but being an African, being from an African family, that really wasn't encouraged. So after dabbling in art, I actually did fashion design and things like that. I was encouraged to do something else, so I did law, and I like law. I mean, law is also quite creative as far as I'm concerned, because you are an advocate telling a story for your clients at times, and I enjoy it, I love it, but art was always my first choice, and so now I have the opportunity to go back to that, so why not?
So are you having the two at the same? Are you being a lawyer and then practicing art?
Initially, yes, but now my focus is more on art at this point.
So what part of your personality made that, it brought you to making that choice of more conventional towards more expressive and more creative type of work?
Well, I think if you're a creative person, I think it's just part of you. You're born like that. You will always create. So even as a lawyer, I found myself being more creative, maybe even in writing something, just the words that you choose, the way you put something together, the way you present something, was always, I always thought of it in a creative way. But sorry, I don't. Your question again?
It's like
what brought me
So no,
towards art again?
Yeah.
It's always been part of me, you know. But it was a different path that I took. But eventually, I've arrived on my original path.
Great. I appreciated that you also mentioned how writing is also another creative way of doing art, and crafting a message, you know, or even trying to do what visual arts also achieve to do. But then now that you are in this art industry, what are the main challenges that you have encountered in the field?
Challenges from being in Sierra Leone? Well, I don't think art has it didn't have much of a reputation in Sierra Leone. We do have older Sierra Leonean artists, because art has been a part of our culture, but I think since the war happened, a lot of that came to an end. But there are great artists like Professor Kosa Thomas and Louise Metzger and Olayinka Bernie-Nickel, who's deceased, and you know, Hassan Bangura, of course, who designed the Sierra Leonean coat of arms and the Sierra Leonean flag, and most of us, I'm sure most of the people in here probably have never heard of these people, and the whole art scene seemed to have died. So myself and a friend of mine, we put together a group called the Barray, and we wanted to, initially it was just a very casual thing to encourage artists and, you know, because we were both interested in art as well, and to practice and to work together. And then we had an artist who came here during Ebola. He's now really a world famous artist, Nelson Makamo from South Africa. And we worked with him, and he sort of really encouraged us that we need to do exhibitions and things like that. So we started doing that in 2015, and I think it's beginning to have a ripple effect on the whole culture, because like even this past December we did our 9th exhibition, and at the same time we had 2 other exhibitions by other groups of artists starting up. So that's fantastic. It means that art is beginning to pick up again, and creativity is beginning to awaken again in our society, which is great.
Yeah. So they're inviting us to speak louder.
Okay,
so
I'm sorry. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you can't hear me. I'm sorry, people.
Okay, that's great. So the challenge that I captured is more of people's tendency of just looking down at art.
Yes, I think we're trying to. One of our missions is really to change the whole perception and see art as a viable career. I mean, there are artists. Well, especially now, this is a climate which is great for African art. African art is really having it's being celebrated the world over, right now. And Sierra Leone really should take a place in that. We have a lot of very talented people. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we will be able to encourage more people to explore that creativity. Some of the other challenges that we face here, again, maybe getting hold of materials, art materials. And art materials are expensive as it is, but, people can be creative and use, what they have. There's several African art fairs that are now taking place all over the world. And, I've been to, like, the 154, which stands for, like, one continent, 54 countries. It's a art show that focuses only on African art. I think it started in London and New York. Now it's expanded to Morocco and Paris as well recently. And some of the artwork that the artists create there, I mean, some people would use pieces of thread, crumpled up paper, old spoons that they put together to make a sculpture, and all sorts of things. So you can also use what you have around you to create incredible things. And these sort of things are being seen, by the world, and selling for vast amounts of money as well.
So but is it true that the African arts has evolved from being less focused on aesthetics, like focusing more on functional aspects, like or even like to showcase the culture, or for spiritual connection, to now being more about aesthetics and thinking of like what sells more than
I think the only way that I would call it African art is because the artists are African, but I think artists everywhere are the same. So it's African art maybe because it depicts African people or black people, or because the art is original. But I think there's no limit really to what a person can do. I mean, an artist is really free to do whatever they want. They don't need to have to focus on culture or whatever. You can create whatever you want.
So now it's getting out of that box of being created just for worshipping or stuff, and now
of course,
exploring more of aesthetics, or letting the person be free to to let go of their imagination.
Countries like Nigeria and maybe Senegal and South Africa and parts of East Africa, which have a really long tradition in art and art schools and things like that, it's unlimited what they produce. I think it's maybe other people's perceptions that tend to say that, oh well, African art is only about masks and that sort of thing. That's maybe the perception of the West. But I mean, I think it's time for us to write our own narratives and define what African art is. And I think that it's unlimited.
That is so true. Yeah. And I do believe that the reason why people have that type of perception of art, like that is absolutely limited, but also that is not encouraged among even in households. Has also to do with the fact that in schools, creativity is not encouraged or even taught.
No.
So, so it's more of conformity. People have to conform themselves to curriculums that are not including or inviting creativity. So, where do you think it has led us, and how can we, be creative about bringing that into schooling?
Okay, I'll try to answer that. I mean, I think it's important for people to learn to think creatively, because art is also, when you're creating a work of art, it's also about solving problems. How do I depict what I want to depict? Where do I put this or that or the other? And it's you have to use your creativity to solve those problems, and that same creativity can be used to solve other problems. It allows you to train your mind to think outside of the box, and I think that in our schools, people tend to learn by rote. I mean, you have to, teachers will dictate that this is what, for example, XYZ equals whatever, and the student is expected to repeat exactly what the teacher has taught them. You don't go beyond that, and that's a shame, because you can see that even in our society, when you look around, creativity is lacking. I mean, you see people making, for example, somebody made a pot for me the other day, and I was trying to find out if they could make the pot in a different way. Can you design it differently or whatever? Can you make it this way, that way? And they said, no, this is the way the pots are made. Every single pot is made exactly the same way. People don't, cooking pot. Why can't we use our creativity and create something different? So I think that's because maybe from early ages, people are told that this is the way that something must be done, and everybody does it that way. So I think if creativity was encouraged in schools, maybe people would come up with incredible ideas of what to create. I mean, our African history shows that we have so much potential, we have so much in us, that we are sometimes not even aware of.
I'm still wondering how to bring it in the schools. You know what I mean? So, we know the curriculum is not something that we necessarily decide. Like when I'm putting my kids at a certain school, most of the time I know they don't offer that. They don't allow them to experiment stuff and to just come back with something that will be valued. So how can we, as communities, as nations, try make sure that it is added to the curriculum?
I think maybe just more advocacy for that. Okay. That would be up to education ministries and things like that. But people have to understand the value of creativity as well. I mean, it's not just limited to creating visual images. I mean, when it comes to maybe even electronics, design, computer programs, all sorts of things require creativity. I mean, if you think about something like a phone, like an iPhone is something that's really beautiful to look at. But the original cell phones were really quite long before your time. I mean, they were horrible, big, bulky things, and these things are designed in beautiful ways, and it adds value to them. Cars need to be designed, houses need to be designed. Everything needs creativity. The chairs that we're sitting on right here, I mean, we could be sitting on a wooden bench. It's functional. It would serve the same purpose, but this is beautiful to look at, and I think that sort of affects you in a spiritual way, as well.
You talked about creativity in creating phones and stuff, and it made me think of how people now talk about innovators, and automatically when they say innovators, we think of technology most of the time. While those innovators are also part of the creative family.
Exactly.
Because
they can work together. They need each other, I think. Technology without artistic design would be quite boring, I think.
I do think that Steve Jobs taught us something about that.
I think he had a lot of he placed a lot of importance in aesthetics. Although that may add to the cost, but people still appreciate it.
And then another way of looking at it is, even if it's costly, but it's still that type of quality and it's creative, it changes from what people knew,
right,
automatically they will then go for the most expensive that will give them that extra posh
status
stuff that
yeah
they were looking for.
yeah
I do think so. Yeah, so I just wanted also to know about you personally and what inspires you when you are creating.
Okay. I am inspired by colors. I most of my work will involve a lot of color, and sometimes just seeing different color combinations in nature inspires me. But also, I'm very, very fascinated with African history and what we know, about our African history, because I think our education systems and even globally, our African history is not told. Africans, I mean, human beings originated in Africa. Yet when we were going to school, I mean, I was just told that we were discovered by European explorers, and before that we lived in the jungle. But when you read the history books, you'll find so much, from ancient times, from ancient Egypt to all the various different kingdoms that lived in Africa. You're also told that African people never wrote. They didn't know how to write. But when you look at the history, you'll find that we have so many different scripts, just even in West Africa alone, than in most parts of the world. And I try to incorporate some of that in my art, because I find it's a way of advocating for our people to learn about their African history, because that will change your perception of yourself and your perception of what you're capable of. Because the things that were achieved on the African continent, in centuries and centuries ago, are sometimes still unmatched to this day. Even though we're labeled as savages or whatever. And so, yes, I do try to incorporate that in my work as a way of advocating for that, and also as a way of educating people so people can see it and starting conversations, and people can talk about it and maybe look into it themselves.
So that was going to be as a curiosity, like how do you convene your own African or Sierra Leonean background to your writing, because to your to your creations, because looking at your paintings, yes, I know it's our people that are represented, but then it's more of, you look at it, it's black people.
Yes.
But then how does, like, you being a Sierra Leonean and a woman, because we also mentioned about you advocating for women, their own way of
perception of ourselves,
of identity, but also how we even tell our story. So how do you convene that in the?
Well, I mean, when you think about even the concept of Sierra Leone, that is it's a relic of colonialism. Before Sierra Leone existed, Africa existed. We had a whole load of different African kingdoms and African culture that existed. So I don't see a reason to limit myself to Sierra Leone. It's not something that was created by us Africans. It is a relic of, as I said, of colonialism. So and I think it's important to depict strong images of African women and African people, black people, because it does affect us. I mean, the media tends to focus on very negative images of black people, focus on poverty and people that are maybe homeless or sick or dying and that sort of thing, when there's so much more that could be focused on. There's so much more that we can project of who we are and what we're capable of. And I think that tends to limit people's own imagination as to what they can achieve if that's all you see of yourself or people that look like yourself. I mean, when you think about somewhere like maybe New York City, it's if you think of New York, you think of skyscrapers and beautiful buildings and wealth and all sorts of things. But there are parts of New York City that are filthy and dirty and poor, but that's not projected. So why are we so focused on projecting all this negative images of Africa? So I believe in projecting positive and strong images of African and African people.
It's great that you talked about how we are depicted,
Yeah.
you know, internationally.
Yes.
How we are depicted, and talking about even the West. Sometimes you see if they have like natural disasters, how they picture the solidarity of people who are even devastated but who support each other.
Yeah.
You know, so that's like something that we usually don't do. We just show ourselves like at our worst, when we are like the worst part of us, when we have those very uplifting and very beautiful aspects of ourselves, our cultures and our ways of living.
Right.
Yeah. So just wanted to talk about women, you know, because I know you're very interested in how we as women also represent ourselves in arts. So, you know, most of the time what we see is women who are super tired, carrying water and
babies
stuff.
And all that
yeah,
stuff.
Even though we know and we don't deny that we have that part of ourselves.
Yes.
Some of us are struggling, and even their struggle affects us who are also thriving somehow. But then how do we actually currently depict ourselves as women in African arts, and how can we make it even more attractive?
Well, I think that there are a lot of female artists now that are African female artists that are looking at strong images of African women, and I think that empowers especially like the younger generation growing up and seeing strong images of women. You know, I mean, I think in our African history there are strong women, you know, whether they're women warriors or queens and you know, goddesses, you know, but these things were changed once we had different cultures or different religions introduced into our country or into our continent, which sort of embraced patriarchy and you know, sort of put women down. And now it's you know, people have that image in their mind that a woman's place is below. I don't know if that is something that was in place maybe thousands and thousands of years ago, because you think of strong women characters in African history who were not treated in that sort of way, you know. So we're as African women artists, we're exploring that, and we're trying to project, I guess, a different image of what an African woman is and can be.
It's so true. What you just said brought to my mind a discussion with a friend of mine who is Ghanaian, and who was telling me that what they knew more was matriarchal.
Yes.
You know, they knew nothing about patriarchy.
We do have a history of matriarchal societies. Yeah. So how did that change? You know, are the sort of things that I am interested in exploring as well.
And another mystery is like, because colonialism is so powerful, and they had a purpose of just like, you know, completely erasing our memories and the relics of our civilization and all. So, you know, it's a mystery. Like, where can people go to find the reality? You know, because sometimes what puzzles me is like, okay, my mom tells me that, the Fula culture, we were like this, and I'm like, she wants me to just feel, you know. So in relation to what she's saying, it's me taking it from her.
Yes.
But like the storytelling is a big part of our culture.
Right.
But then where else can we find, you know, that great source of knowledge?
I mean, there's a lot of African and Black scholars out there who have contributed to our knowledge of our history. But I mean, if you go to school, you won't learn. I thought I was educated. You know, I thought I went to school, I have a degree, you know, I'm a professional woman. I thought I knew things. But obviously, you know, since I've been living in Sierra Leone, I started to explore more about African history, and I realized I'm completely ignorant, you know, and I started to learn these things. And there's lots of research. There's Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, who's a fantastic scholar, and we're lucky that in this day and age, you know, we have internet, we have Google, you can look up African history, and I think it's really important that that sort of thing should be taught in our schools, because it's not being taught. What's being taught is that we were discovered by European explorers, and that's where our history begins. It's the same thing in America too. I mean, where black people are taught that their history begins with slavery, which is not true, you know. And I think that through art, through depicting, you know, parts of our African history, we can get people maybe to become more curious and look into those things, and, you know, educate themselves and uplift themselves through that. You know, so that's my hope anyway.
Yeah.
You know.
It's so humbling, like the story that you just shared of thinking that we are so educated.
Yeah.
You know, but looking at it from a certain angle, yes, we are. But when it comes to where you're coming from, your roots, you know, that determine exactly your identity and all that, we know so much less than what we're supposed to know when it comes to our cultures. I was sharing with you how last month I discovered about the Adinkra symbols among the Ghanaian people, and I was so humbled by that. I was like, where was I?
Right.
You know, what do I know, in fact? And it completely changed all the narrative for me. And I was like, I have to focus on discovering more of what we have as Africans. Not even thinking of our borders.
Yes, I mean, even I was listening to a gentleman called Anthony Browder, who's he's an artist, but now he's more of an archaeologist, and he's excavating a tomb in Egypt or in Sudan area. And he has found Adinkra symbols in that tomb, in this ancient Egyptian tomb. And I know, like, in the Western tradition, they try to separate Egypt from Africa to say that this, I mean, the Egyptian civilization is something that cannot be replicated up to this day. And it is an African civilization, according to Sheikh Anta Diop. And they've been trying to, you know, separate us from that, but it is all linked. And if we knew who we really were, you know, I think that we would be totally different. You know, our aspirations would be so much better. You know, we would do better. You know, but when all you see of yourself is images of helplessness and poverty and all that, then that is what you will aspire to as well. So I think we need to change that.
That's so true. It's so true. And also you mentioned Sudan, and you know, people. Like, I'm sure most of us thought that Egypt is where we can find, you know, most of pyramids, but Sudan is the place where you have
even more,
even more pyramids, and in ways and forms that amazes, that blows our minds. So, you know, there is so much of Africa that we really don't know of. So the invitation is for us to embrace more who we are. You know, the rich continent that we are born in. So, because most of the time people tell you, oh, we are born on the wrong continent. But we need to reconsider and think again whenever we are thinking of where we are, where we landed. It's not by chance that we are here. So, thank you so much for that. We'll take a short break. Esther, back to you.
And have people see them, because a lot of people haven't heard of it. I think it's different for us living in Africa because we are not a minority, we're a majority. So, I mean, the president is black, everybody's black, the ministers are black. Black men are important people in our society. They're not the bottom of the society. They're not disrespected in the same way as they are in America. You know, but when we see this sort of thing, I mean, it's
it's heartbreaking. It's unbelievable. We can't believe that a black man is being treated in this sort of way, you know. And when it comes down to it, I mean, we're all the same people.
This is actually from the last exhibition that we did in December at Toma Resort, and the exhibition was called "In Black We Trust." So normally in the group that I'm in, we sit together, we discuss about different issues, and we come up with a theme, something that we all think about and that we want to create an exhibition around. So with all the stuff that was happening with the Black Lives Matter and just the whole black identity, we wanted to put together this exhibition called "In Black We Trust." So each artist would actually produce one painting or one piece of work, at least one piece of work, called "In Black We Trust," and that was what it was about. And we had a lot of interest from, you saw the video that was done by Reuters. I looked very awful in that video because I think it was like 2 days before the exhibition. I was totally stressed out, but you know, they insisted on doing it. And then we also had, like, the BBC was there. They aired a program on us recently. We had a lot of local press. And so some of the images, these are all called "In Black," which is just to show like the beauty of blackness and the power in blackness. And this particular painting, you can see the Bassa handwriting, this one here. This one is called "Know Thyself," and it's basically about knowing your history. And you can see the Bassa writing, which it's a real script that was used in the area that is now Sierra Leone and Liberia. And I think there's still Bassa speakers in Sierra Leone and in Liberia. It's an old writing system, you know, and I find it very beautiful. I can't understand it, obviously. None of us here can understand it, but maybe if history had been different, you know, maybe we would be speaking or writing in a lot of these different texts and languages. And then this other one here, that's an older one that's called "The Black Man's Burden," and deals with the issue of racism. You know, there was a poet, an English poet called Rudyard Kipling, who wrote a poem called "The White Man's Burden," which said that it was a white man's duty to go out and civilize all other people, dark-skinned people. But when, as I said, again, if we look at our own history, if we knew who we were, then we would understand that we were at the top. We were not at the bottom. We did not need civilizing. So how is it now that the black man is now at the bottom? What happened? What changed that? You know, and obviously it's this sort of thinking and these sort of ideas that have, you know, put us where we are now. And this burden of racism is now something that the black man and the black woman has to carry. The discrimination and things like the name calling. When you look into, I did like a Google search on racial slurs, and the most of them, the majority of racial slurs are against black men. That here is Umaru Fofana, who was at the exhibition. He's one of our foremost journalists in Sierra Leone. So these are just a selection of pictures. I'm also on Instagram. You can see some of my work there. And the handle is at Hawa_Jane, Jane. So hopefully in the future, you know, hope to do like a lot more international exhibitions and things like that as well.